Hey friends, it's your girl Mia. This is Mia Horror Stories. And tonight's story, I live alone. But my phone keeps unlocking with Face ID is told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. At 2:13 a.m., my phone unlocked itself. Not all the way, not to the home screen with my stupid, little weather widget, and the Slack notifications I pretended I didn't see. But far enough that the lock icon at the top flipped open, and the flashlight button brightened like it had just recognized me. The screen glow slid across the ceiling in a soft rectangle, pale and wrong against the dark. I hadn't touched it. My hands were under the duvet, curled around the hem of my t-shirt, because my apartment always ran cold at night, no matter what the thermostat said. The phone was face up on the nightstand where I always put it, plugged into the cheap braided cable I'd bought at Walgreens when my old one frayed. I could see the cable's little LED dot, steady red, like a tiny eye. The phone made that almost silent click it makes when Face ID succeeds. Then it went still again. For a second I lay there and listened, trying to decide whether I'd dreamed the click. The building had its usual soundtrack, the fridge cycling in the kitchen, an elevator cable sighing somewhere behind the walls, a distant car hissing through wet streets. My upstairs neighbor's radiator knocked twice like it was clearing its throat. Nothing else. I sat up slowly, because some part of my brain was treating the phone like an animal you don't want to spook. I leaned over it, squinting. The screen was still on. It wasn't asking for my passcode. It wasn't doing the red face not recognized thing. It was awake. There was a notification banner at the top that hadn't been there when I fell asleep. Face ID unlocked. It wasn't a notification, not really, but one of those subtle system messages that blinked and faded if you didn't look fast enough. I caught the tail end of it like you catch a glance at someone turning away. I picked the phone up. The glass was cool. The camera array at the top stared back at me, black and glossy, centered like a pupil. I turned the brightness down, then up, then down again like that would fix it. I swiped down to the control center and stared at my own reflection in the screen. My face looked like a stranger's face, swollen with sleep, hair sticking in a stressed halo, one cheek creased from the pillow. "Okay," I whispered, because the room felt too big for no sound. "Okay, that's fine." I tried to be reasonable. Phones do weird things. True depth cameras have false positives. There are edge cases. There's always an explanation for a thing that doesn't make sense at 2:13 a.m. when you're half asleep and your brain is still in dream logic. I pressed the side button to lock it. The screen went black. I waited. Nothing happened. I put it back down and lay flat again, eyes open, feeling ridiculous. There was no one else here. I lived alone. I always lived alone. That was kind of the point. My name is Mara Bennett. I'm 32, and I moved into this one bedroom in North Seattle because it was close enough to my job and far enough from my last relationship that I could breathe without checking my reflection in every window. The building was a squat, newer thing with gray siding and a lobby that smelled like lemony floor cleaner. I paid too much for it, and the management company sent emails like they were written by a robot that hated you. I told myself the Face ID thing was a glitch and forced my eyelids down. 2 minutes later, The phone clicked again. This time the screen lit up brighter, like it was sure of itself. I sat up so fast the duvet slid off my legs. The cold air hit my thighs and raised little bumps. I snatched the phone before it could dim. On the lock screen, there were tiny text lines near the top, the sort you only see if you're looking for them. Face ID unlocked below that. A message bubble preview hovered from an app I'd installed months ago and never used. A home security camera service I'd convinced myself I needed, and then forgot about because paying rent felt like juggling knives. The preview read, "Motion detected." I stared at it until the words went a little fuzzy. My thumb hovered. If I tapped it, I'd open it. If I opened it, I'd have to deal with whatever was on the other side of that notification. It was a stupid thought, like a child thinking if you don't look under the bed, nothing can grab your ankle. I tapped it anyway. The app opened with the little spinning wheel and a stock photo of a smiling family in a living room that looked nothing like mine. Then it loaded to my single camera feed. I'd stuck the camera on top of the bookshelf in my living room, angled toward the front door and the slice of hallway that led to my bedroom. It was meant to be peace of mind, a cheap eye. Feed showed the living room, empty. The shadows were in the wrong places because the only light came from the street lamp outside my window and a faint glow from the microwave clock. The couch sat like a dark block. The plant by the window drooped like it was tired too. My front door was closed. The chain wasn't latched because I never latched it. I told myself it was because it was annoying, but really it was because I'd once locked myself out and had to sit in the hallway in socks until a neighbor let me in. I watched the feed for movement. Nothing. Then, in the top corner, the app put a small timestamp and a tiny event log. 2:13 a.m. motion detected. 2:15 a.m. motion detected. 2 little red dots. My throat felt dry. I swallowed and tasted toothpaste and sleep. Maybe the radiator, I said, though the camera couldn't hear me unless I hit the microphone button. The radiator hadn't moved. The plant hadn't moved. Dust motes didn't trigger motion detection. The air felt still. I backed out and opened settings instead, like a person choosing to reorganize a drawer while the kitchen is on fire. I went to Face ID and passcode. I stared at the toggles. iPhone unlock. On, require attention for Face ID. On, attention aware features. On. I toggled require attention off, then on again. It felt like flicking a light switch. I checked set up an alternate appearance and stared at the little oval outline on the screen that wanted my face. Alternate appearance. I'd read about it, how you could add yourself with sunglasses or a mask. People used it for identical twins, for other people. My mouth did something small and involuntary, like it wanted to smile, but couldn't figure out why. My private fear, the one I didn't say out loud, was never about ghosts or killers or anything dramatic. It was simpler. It was the idea that someone could be inside your life without you noticing, that you could be observed and managed and guided like a shopping cart by invisible hands. I'd had a boyfriend once who could unlock my phone because he'd watched me type the passcode over my shoulder by accident enough times that he knew it. He'd used it to scroll through my messages while I slept. When I'd confronted him, he'd acted hurt, like my privacy was the betrayal. I stared at the Face ID setup screen and felt that old heat creep up my neck. My phone clicked again. Not the unlock click. A softer sound. A message arriving. I flinched hard enough to almost drop it. The message banner slid down from the top. Unknown accessory detected. A Bluetooth pairing request. The name was a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing. BT-A3F9. My brain reached for logic like a hand grabbing for a railing. A neighbor's headphones, someone's car, a speaker, a glitch. A lot of things in apartments bleed through walls. Wi-Fi networks, laughter, arguments, sometimes the smell of frying onions. Still, at 2:16 in the morning, the word unknown felt personal. I hit cancel. The banner disappeared. The room didn't change. The same dim ceiling. The same faint car hiss outside. But my body was different. My heart had started doing that tight, hard beat that makes your ears feel full. My fingers were cold, and I realized I'd been gripping the phone too tightly, like it could run away. I got out of bed. The floor was colder than I expected. I stood for a second, letting my eyes adjust. My bedroom door was open a crack, as it always was. I liked being able to see the sliver of hallway and the shadowed edge of the living room. It made the apartment feel less like a box. Tonight, that sliver felt like a cut in paper. I walked barefoot to the door, phone in my hand, and listened. No footsteps, no whispering, no TV murmurs from another unit. Just the building's low, indifferent noises and my own breath. I flicked on my bedside lamp. Warm light spilled out, turning my room into something normal again. Laundry chair, paperback on the floor, the mug I'd promised myself I'd bring to the sink. I stepped into the hallway and flipped on that light too. The living room was exactly how I'd left it. Shoes by the door, mail on the counter, a half-empty bottle of dish soap beside the sink. The camera on the bookshelf sat in its little plastic cradle, pointed at the door like a patient animal. I walked toward it slow. I reached up and touched the camera's housing. Smooth plastic, still, no obvious tampering. The little indicator light was off. It only lit when streaming. I turned it slightly, just to be sure it wasn't angled somewhere else. The feed on my phone showed my own arm entering the frame, pale and goose-bumped. Okay. That meant the camera was telling the truth. It was pointed where I thought it was. I took a breath and tried to slow my thoughts down into something I could hold. Motion detected could mean anything. It could mean a shadow shift from the street lamp outside because a car passed. It could mean my neighbor slammed a door and the vibration shook the bookshelf. It could mean my plant leaf moved. Face ID unlocking itself was harder. But maybe the phone had woken and tried to scan, and in the dim light, it mistook something for my face. Maybe it saw a photo. Maybe it saw my reflection. People on the internet would have explanations. People always did. I glanced at the window. Outside, the street lamp glowed through thin rain. My reflection hovered faint in the glass. I stared at it and felt my stomach tighten at how easy it was to imagine someone watching from below, or from across the street, or from the hallway. I walked to the door and checked the deadbolt. It was locked. I twisted the knob anyway. Solid. Then I checked the chain latch out of habit and felt annoyed at myself for not using it. The chain hung slack like an accusation. I took my phone back into my hands and opened the event log again, scrolling. 2 motion events. No video clip saved because I turned that feature off to avoid paying extra. Of course, I tapped live view. The living room feed showed me in the middle of the room, hair messy, shoulders hunched, phone glow in my hand. I didn't look like someone in danger. I looked like someone about to spiral in her own apartment at 2:17 a.m. over a phone notification. I set the phone down on the counter and stared at it like it might confess. My hands wanted something to do, so I opened a drawer and took out my spare key ring. I did that sometimes late at night when anxiety needed an object. It was a stupid little ritual. Check keys, check wallet, check stove. Proof of control. The keys jingled softly. The sound traveled too far in the apartment. I froze. I hadn't heard it before because I'd been moving. Now, still, I caught a different sound underneath everything. A faint, intermittent buzz, like a phone vibrating against wood, except it wasn't mine. Mine was on the counter, silent. The buzz came again, thin and brief. I turned my head toward the living room. The camera sat on the bookshelf. Still, but the bookshelf had a drawer at the bottom. One of those fake drawers that was actually just a panel covering the power strip and cable mess. I'd left it slightly ajar because the camera's cord didn't fit well, and I was lazy about making things tidy. The buzz came again. It wasn't loud. It was familiar. A specific kind of vibration, softened by distance. My skin prickled, not with cold, but with that alertness you get when you realize your assumptions might be wrong. I walked toward the bookshelf, slow enough that the floorboards didn't creak. The buzz happened once more, closer now. Definitely from the bottom of the shelf. Crouched and put my fingers on the edge of the panel. The wood was painted white, slightly rough where it had been chipped by past tenants. I pulled gently. The panel shifted. A small gap opened wider. Inside, there was a tangle of cables, the power strip, and half hidden under a coil of Ethernet, I didn't remember owning something dark and rectangular. A second phone. Or something that looked exactly like one, face down, with a thin case. It buzzed again, just a whisper of movement against the wood. My throat made a small sound I didn't recognize as mine. I reached in. My fingers brushed cold glass. I slid it toward me, the case scraping softly. The object came out into the light. It was a smartphone, not mine, bigger than mine, in a black case with a cracked corner. The screen was lit with a notification, but it was too angled to read until I lifted it. The top of the screen said Face ID. My brain did a weird, stumbling thing, like it couldn't parse the phrase in this context. Like it was a sign on a road where no road should be. Then the screen dimmed, and before it went dark, it flashed a lock icon that opened. It unlocked as soon as it faced me. I stared at it, crouched on the floor in my own living room, holding a phone that wasn't mine, watching it recognize my face like I belonged to it. I sat back hard enough to knock my shoulder against the bookshelf. The camera wobbled slightly in its cradle. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything dramatic. My body went very still, and my thoughts piled up behind my eyes, loud and chaotic. I forced myself to breathe, one inhale at a time, like I was trying not to hyperventilate in public. My mind offered options, rapid fire. Call the police. Don't call the police. They'll say it's a misunderstanding. Run into the hallway. Don't run, you'll look crazy. Throw the phone out the window. Keep it, it's evidence. Unlock your own phone and record. Your phone is the problem. I looked at my own phone on the counter, glowing softly from where I'd left it. It felt suddenly untrustworthy, like a person who'd been lying to my face and smiling. I held the unknown phone up again, angling it away from my face. The screen stayed unlocked. That meant it had just used Face ID to get in, which meant someone had set it up to recognize me. Or it was my phone, somehow. But it was. I knew my phone. I knew the scratch near the volume button. I knew the cheap pink case. This was not it. I stood slowly, my knees popping. I glanced at the front door. Still locked, still closed. The deadbolt stared back. There was no supernatural explanation. There couldn't be. That wasn't how the world worked. That wasn't the kind of story my life got to be. So the explanation had to be human. And that was worse. I picked up my own phone, then stopped. My fingers hovered over it. If my phone was unlocking itself, and this other phone was unlocking to my face, then my phone, my identity, my face, my daily routine, was part of something I didn't understand yet. I looked down at the second phone again. It was unlocked. It was in my hand. It might contain answers. It might also be a trap, a way to know I'd found it, a way to pull me deeper. I could do one of two things right now. I could leave it alone, lock everything, and call 911 with trembling hands and hope the dispatcher took me seriously. Or I could scroll through what was on this phone first, just enough to know what I was saying when I asked for help, just enough to not sound like a sleep-deprived woman accusing the walls. My thumb hovered over the screen. The unknown phone buzzed again, a soft, impatient purr, as if someone somewhere was trying to reach it. I stood in the middle of my living room, the rain ticking faintly against the window, two phones in my hands, and felt the weight of choosing wrong. The unknown phone buzzed again in my hand. Not a text tone, not a call, a vibration, steady, deliberate. Whoever was trying to reach it wasn't giving up. I forced myself to look at the screen. It was unlocked. No passcode prompt. No home screen cluttered with apps. Just a messages thread already open, like someone had left a book face down mid-sentence. Contact name at the top wasn't a name. It was a single letter. M, the most recent message. You there? Sent 2:18 a.m. 3 gray dots appeared, then disappeared. My throat tightened. I wasn't sure what frightened me more, that someone was texting this phone right now, or that they expected a response. I didn't type back. I didn't move. I just stood there in the living room, rain ticking against the glass, my own reflection hovering faintly in the window behind the screen. Another message came through. She asleep, my body reacted before my mind caught up. I stepped back like the words had heat. They weren't texting me. They were texting someone about me. The phone buzzed again. Camera triggered twice. You sure it's set right? The camera. My eyes snapped to the bookshelf. The little plastic lens stared blankly across the room. It had sent those motion alerts. The timing lined up. I felt something cold and precise click into place in my head. Whoever owned this phone knew about my camera, and they knew it had detected movement. I thought about calling 911 again, about running into the hallway in bare feet and pounding on someone's door. But the hallway was a closed system at this hour. Most people in this building worked tech or healthcare. Night shifts, late hours, doors stayed shut. Another message, answer me. The 3 dots reappeared. I did something reckless. I typed, "Who is this?" My fingers were shaking so hard I mistyped the first time. Deleted and retyped, trying to keep it neutral. Not confrontational, not panicked. The dots stopped. A long pause, then, what? I stared at that one word. My heart was thudding loud enough that I could hear the pulse in my ears. I typed again, slower this time. You texted me. I almost added a period, then deleted it. I didn't want to sound sharp. I didn't want to sound like anything. Another pause. Longer this time, then. Is this funny? My skin felt tight. I typed, I found this phone. The dots appeared instantly. Whoever was on the other end was staring at their screen, waiting. Then nothing. No response. The silence stretched. My brain filled it with images I didn't want. Someone sitting in a parked car outside, looking up at my windows. Someone in another apartment, watching through a peephole camera I hadn't noticed. I walked to the window, staying low without meaning to, and parted the curtain just a sliver. The street below was almost empty. One sedan idled at the curb half a block down, headlights off. It could have belonged to anyone, or no one. My phone, my real phone, buzzed on the counter. I flinched and almost dropped the other one. The notification banner slid down. Face ID unlocked again. I hadn't even picked it up. The screen lit, showing my home screen like it had just recognized me from across the room. I felt exposed in a way that didn't make sense. The camera on my phone was facing the ceiling. It couldn't see me, unless it could. I grabbed it and flipped it over so the screen was against the counter. The unknown phone vibrated again. A new message, "Don't touch anything." My stomach dropped. The next one came before I could process the first. "Put it back." The words were simple, not threatening, not angry. That was what made them worse. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Who are you?" 3 dots. Stop. Start again. Then, "You're not supposed to see that." The phrasing hit something in me, that old private fear of being managed without my knowledge, being the subject of something instead of the author. I took a breath and tried to think like a person who wasn't spiraling. Okay, facts. There was a second phone in my apartment, hidden in a place I hadn't checked in months. It was set to unlock with my face. It was being actively monitored by someone who knew about my security camera. They were aware I'd found it, which meant one of 2 things. The phone had location services on, and they could see it had moved. Or there was someone close enough to see me take it out. I forced myself not to look at the door. Not yet. Another message. "This isn't how this was supposed to go." I typed, "Go where?" No response. Instead, the phone screen flickered. Not dramatically, just a subtle shift, like an app switching in the background. Then the camera app opened, rear facing. I was staring at my own living room through the lens of the unknown phone. The view was angled slightly upward, as if the phone had been propped inside the shelf facing outward. My breath caught. That meant this phone hadn't just been hidden. It had been positioned. The image on the screen showed the couch, the plant, the front door. The angle was slightly different from my security camera, lower, more intimate. It felt like someone kneeling on the floor watching. I scrolled up, heart hammering. The camera roll. Hundreds of thumbnails. Most were dark, blurry shots of the room at night. The couch empty, the hallway dim. Some were daytime, sunlight cutting across the rug. Me walking through frame in leggings and an old college sweatshirt, hair in a bun, holding a coffee mug. I felt a weird detachment watching myself like that, like it was surveillance footage from a case I wasn't part of. I scrolled further back. Weeks. The timestamps went back at least 3 months. 3 months of my life in grainy stills. My private routines. The way I paced when I was on the phone. The way I left the kitchen light on if I was coming back. There were no images of me sleeping. The angle didn't reach into my bedroom. That was the only small mercy. I heard a sound then. A soft, metallic click. Not from my phone, not from the bookshelf, from the front door. It was subtle, the kind of sound you only recognize because you've lived with it. The faint movement of a handle being tested. I froze. unknown phone was still in my hand, camera open, showing the room. In the frame, the door didn't move, but I had heard something. Another click, slightly firmer. Someone was trying the knob. My brain snapped into something colder and clearer. I stepped back from the door, keeping my weight off the floor as much as possible to avoid noise. The deadbolt was locked. I had checked it, but the chain wasn't latched. I moved forward slowly and slid the chain into place with as little sound as I could manage. The metal scraped softly against the bracket. The handle turned harder this time. The deadbolt held. A voice came through the door, low, male. Hey, it wasn't shouted. It wasn't aggressive. It was the tone someone uses when they don't want to wake neighbors. Maintenance, he added. At 2:24 a.m., my mouth felt dry. Who? I called back, keeping my voice steady. Not too loud, not too scared. Building maintenance. We got a water leak report from your unit. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it. The sink was dry. The bathroom was dry. I hadn't run anything. There's no leak, I said, a pause. We need to come in and check. My eyes flicked to the unknown phone screen still glowing in my hand. The messages, the camera roll, the texts about motion detection. This wasn't random. I'll call the office in the morning, I said. You can come back then. Silence on the other side. Then, more quietly, closer to the door, open the door. Not maintenance tone anymore. Flat. I took a step back. My own phone buzzed again on the counter. Face ID unlocked again. I picked it up and realized something that made my stomach flip. The unknown phone was still unlocked, camera open, facing the room, which meant whoever was connected to it could see the door, could see me, could see that I hadn't opened it. I did the only thing I could think of. I hit the side button and powered the unknown phone off. The screen went black. Instantly, my own phone vibrated in my hand. A call. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It stopped, started again. The handle on the door rattled once more, harder this time. The chain clinked. Last chance, the voice said, no longer pretending. I backed up toward the kitchen, scanning for something heavy. My eyes landed on the knife block. I grabbed the largest chef's knife, my hand slick on the handle. I hated that this was happening. Hated that I was barefoot on cold tile, holding a knife in my own apartment. I dialed 911. The call rang once, twice, then connected. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone trying to get into my apartment, I said, forcing the words out clean. They say they're maintenance. It's 2:25 a.m. I didn't call anyone. What's your address? I gave it. Are they inside? No, they're at the door. They tried the handle. There was a thud against the door then. Not a kick, more like a shoulder checking the strength. The dispatcher's voice shifted, sharper. Officers are en route. Stay on the line. The man outside didn't try again immediately. Instead, I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. Then silence. I didn't lower the knife. I stayed where I was, heart pounding, listening for the elevator. A minute later, I heard it, the faint mechanical whine as it descended. My phone buzzed again. Not a call, a text, from the unknown number that had just tried to call. You shouldn't have done that. The message arrived even though I had powered the other phone off, which meant they had my number too. My own screen flickered. Face ID unlocked. And before I could react, my phone opened the home app, the one I never used, and the live feed from my security camera filled the screen. Except the angle was wrong. The camera wasn't on the bookshelf anymore. It was on the floor, pointed up. And in the corner of the frame, just for a second before the feed cut to black, I saw a boot step into view inside my apartment. The dispatcher was still talking when the feed cut to black. "Mara, stay with me. Are you in a secure room?" I couldn't answer right away. I was staring at my own phone screen, at the reflection of my face in the glass where the camera feed had just been. The last image: boot, black sole, scuffed toe, looped in my head. Inside. My voice came out thin. I swallowed and tried again. My camera. It just showed someone in my apartment. "Are you certain?" the dispatcher asked, voice steady but sharpened now. "Yes." I looked toward the living room from the kitchen. The apartment layout was simple. Front door straight ahead from the living room, couch against the left wall, bookshelf with the camera to the right of the door, kitchen behind me with a narrow hallway leading to my bedroom and bathroom. There was nowhere to hide that wasn't obvious. "I didn't hear anyone come in," I said. "The deadbolt's locked. The chain's on." "Officers are 2 minutes out," she said. "Can you move to a room you can lock?" "My bedroom," I said automatically. But that would mean turning my back on the living room, on the door, on whatever was or wasn't out there. The apartment was silent, too silent. I stepped forward carefully, knife still in my right hand, phone pressed to my ear with my left. The tile gave way to the softer give of the living room rug. I could see the front door clearly from here. Deadbolt horizontal, chain taut. No one standing there. The bookshelf was in its usual spot, flush against the wall to the right of the door. The camera, though, was not where I'd left it. It was on the floor, not angled up at me like in the feed, just lying on its side near the baseboard, cable still plugged in. I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The boot. The boot could have been mine. The feed could have been delayed or buffered, or the app could have switched to a saved clip from earlier when I crouched near the shelf. "You're not inside your bedroom," the dispatcher said gently. "I can see the camera," I whispered. "It's on the floor. I think it fell." "Did you hear it fall?" "No, that didn't mean it hadn't." The buzz of adrenaline had been loud in my ears. I approached the camera slowly. It was a small white cylinder with a pivoting base. The base was still clipped to the shelf. The camera itself had detached from the magnet and dropped. I crouched and picked it up. The magnet clicked back into place easily when I set it against the base. The angle was off now, pointing slightly downward instead of across the room. When I opened the app again, the live feed returned grainy, stable, showing the couch and the door from a lower angle. No boot, just me, pale and shaking, holding a knife. I closed my eyes briefly. Misdirection. My brain had filled in the worst-case scenario from a split-second image. The boot could have been from earlier when I moved near the shelf, and the camera captured my own shoe. Or the app could have glitched, but the door handle had rattled. That part was real. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. "Officers are pulling up now," the dispatcher said. I felt my knees wobble with relief and something like humiliation. I pictured them arriving to find a woman in an oversized t-shirt clutching a kitchen knife because her phone had glitched. "Stay on the line until they knock," she said. A firm knock came at the door, authoritative. "Seattle Police," a voice called. I set the knife on the counter and approached the door. I peered through the peephole first. 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway under the fluorescent light. 1 male, 1 female. I slid the chain off and opened the door. The male officer stepped forward slightly. He was tall, late 30s, white, clean-shaven, hair buzzed short. His badge read Officer Daniel Ruiz, 38, male. His posture was steady, controlled. Behind him stood Officer Kayla Morgan, 29, female, black hair pulled tight into a bun, eyes sharp and assessing. "Ma'am," Ruiz said, "you called about someone trying to enter." "Yes." My voice trembled more now that the immediate threat had passed. "He said he was maintenance. It's 2:30 in the morning." Morgan stepped inside first, scanning the room with quick, efficient movements. Ruiz followed. "Doors intact," Ruiz said after checking the lock. "No visible damage." He tried the handle. I insisted. "I heard it. Anyone you know with a key?" Morgan asked. "No. Maintenance sometimes does after-hours leak checks," Ruiz said, though his tone suggested he doubted it. "There's no leak," I said, and I hesitated. The hidden phone was on the counter, powered off. I picked it up and held it out. This was inside my bookshelf. They both looked at it. "You found it tonight?" Morgan asked. "Yes." It unlocked when it saw my face. Ruiz's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You sure it's not yours?" "It's not." He took it from me, turning it over in his hands. "Power S off." I turned it off. Morgan glanced around the room again, then at the bookshelf. "Mind if we take a look?" I nodded. They crouched near the shelf, inspecting the panel I'd opened. Morgan shone her flashlight inside. "Wiring's a mess," she said. "Could have been tucked in there a while." "It has months of photos," I said quietly. "Of me." That made them both pause. "Photos how?" Ruiz asked. "From here," I gestured to the living room. The camera app was open. It was pointed at the room. Morgan stood and looked at me carefully. "Okay, we're going to take this device as evidence. We'll log it, see if we can pull a serial number." Relief washed through me at that. Someone else would hold it. Someone else would decide what it meant. "Do you have any exes?" Ruiz asked gently. The question felt invasive and obvious at the same time. "Yes," I said. "But he lives in Portland. We haven't spoken in a year." "Anyone with access to your phone recently?" Morgan added. No, that wasn't entirely true. I'd handed my phone to coworkers before to show them pictures, to take group shots, but that wasn't access. They took my statement there in the living room. I stood barefoot on the rug while Ruiz wrote in a small notebook, and Morgan occasionally glanced toward the hallway. As they spoke, exhaustion began to seep in around the edges of my adrenaline. My hands were still shaking. My mouth felt cotton dry. "We'll have patrol do an extra sweep of the building," Ruiz said finally. "Talk to management in the morning about maintenance logs. Change your locks if you can." "I will." They handed me a card with a case number. "If anything else happens tonight," Morgan said, "call us again." They left. The door closed. The apartment felt smaller after they were gone. Quieter. The kind of quiet that isn't relief but aftermath. I locked the deadbolt, latched the chain. Then I leaned my forehead against the wood and let out a slow breath. Attempt 1, call the police. Partial success. The immediate threat had retreated. The hidden phone was gone, but the trap didn't feel looser. It felt rearranged. I walked back into the living room. My own phone lay on the counter where I'd set it, screen dark. I picked it up. Face ID unlocked instantly. Too instantly. I hadn't even raised it fully. I opened settings again, this time with more purpose. Face ID and passcode. There was no alternate appearance set. I scrolled further down. Devices. There were 2 devices listed under my Apple ID, my iPhone, and another iPhone. Same model, same storage capacity. Last active, now. My stomach dropped. That meant the hidden phone hadn't just been recording video locally. It had been signed into my account. Mirroring. I tapped the second device. It showed a map location, not my apartment. A blue dot about 3 blocks away, near the small park by Greenwood Avenue. Active. I stared at it, heart pounding. They hadn't taken the hidden phone far. Or I felt something click into place again, something colder. The officers had taken the phone. If it was still active, that meant either it wasn't actually off when I handed it to them, or there was a third device. I grabbed my coat from the chair by the door and slipped it on without thinking. My feet were still bare. This was stupid. But if there was another phone logged into my account, if someone was still watching, then staying still felt worse. I opened the Find My app. The second device pulsed on the map, moving slowly toward the park. I pictured Ruiz and Morgan walking back to their cruiser, the evidence bag in hand. If the phone was powered off, it shouldn't be pinging live location, not unless it had battery and data, which meant it wasn't the same phone. There was another one. Attempt to trace the device myself. The dispatcher had told me to stay put. The officers had told me to call again if anything happened. This counted as something. But if I waited, whoever had this second device could log out, wipe it, disappear. My private flaw, the one that had always gotten me into trouble, was that I needed to see things through myself. I didn't trust systems to protect me. Not after the last time I'd trusted someone to handle something quietly. I slipped my shoes on without socks and unlocked the door. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The carpet smelled faintly of old cleaner and something metallic. I locked the door behind me and walked quickly to the elevator. As I waited, my phone buzzed. A new notification from my email. Apple ID sign and attempt. Location: Seattle, WA, time now. I stared at the allow and don't allow options. The elevator dinged. I hit don't allow. The doors slid open. I stepped inside, heart hammering. As the elevator descended, my phone vibrated again. A text from an unknown number. "You're making this harder." I didn't respond. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. The lemon cleaner smell was stronger down here. The glass doors at the front showed the street beyond, wet and reflective. I pushed outside into the cool air. The park was visible at the end of the block, dark except for a single lamppost near the playground. The blue dot on my screen moved again, then paused. Right under that lamppost, I started walking. Every footstep felt too loud on the sidewalk. My pulse was a constant drum in my ears. Halfway down the block, my phone screen flickered. Face ID unlocked, without me lifting it. The screen shifted to the camera app, front facing. My own face filled the frame, pale under the streetlight. Then the screen split, picture in picture. In the corner, a small live feed appeared, not from my apartment, from somewhere else. The angle was low, pointed up at the lamppost in the park. I slowed. The blue dot pulsed, and in the tiny live feed, I saw a shadow cross the grass. Not a ghost, not a monster, a person, waiting. The moment stretched thin. Behind me, the building doors clicked shut. Ahead, the park opened dark and wide. I realized, too late, what the point of this had been. Not to get into my apartment, to get me out of it. I was halfway to the park when my phone buzzed again. A new text: "Come alone." And in the live feed window, the camera angle tilted slightly, as if someone had picked up the device and aimed it toward the sidewalk, toward me. There was no going back to my apartment without passing that park entrance. No way to pretend I hadn't seen the live feed. No way to unknow that whoever had been inside my digital life wanted me physically present now. I stood on the wet sidewalk, breath visible in the cold air, and understood that the choice to step outside had already committed me to something I couldn't undo. The live feed in the corner of my screen tilted. The lamppost in the park wobbled out of frame and then steadied again, angled lower now, closer to the ground. The camera wasn't fixed somewhere. It was in someone's hand. I stopped walking. The sidewalk was slick from the rain. My breath came out shallow and fast, fogging in front of my face. The park entrance was 20 yards ahead. A break in the low iron fence, concrete path curving toward the small playground, and the single lamppost. The blue dot on my Find My app pulsed directly under that light. My phone buzzed. Almost here. My stomach dropped. I hadn't texted back. I hadn't confirmed anything. He could see me. I lifted the phone higher, angling it so the front camera would show less of my surroundings. The split screen still showed the lamppost, the grass, the empty swings moving slightly in the wind. A shadow crossed the frame again. I forced myself to think. If this was about control, about getting me to move, to respond, then the worst thing I could do was follow instructions. I stepped sideways, off the direct path to the park entrance, and ducked behind a parked SUV halfway down the block. The metal was cold against my shoulder. The live feed jittered. The lamppost was still in view. No sign of me. My phone buzzed harder this time, a call from the unknown number. I declined it. Immediately, my screen switched. Face ID unlocked. The phone opened messages on its own. Don't do that. My chest tightened. He wasn't just watching my location. He had access to my phone, not physically, remotely. The Apple ID login attempt. The second device. I opened settings fast, fingers slipping. Apple ID, password, and security. Change password. It prompted for my current passcode. I typed it in. Then it asked for two-factor authentication confirmation. A code popped up on the screen. At the same time, the unknown phone in the live feed vibrated visibly in the corner window. He was getting the same code, because the device in the park was still signed into my account. I hit Remove from Account on the second device listing. A warning popped up. Removing this device will erase it. Erase it. I hesitated for half a second. Then I hit Confirm. The live feed flickered, and post image glitched, pixelated. The blue dot on the map froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then the feed went black. The split screen disappeared. My own reflection filled the display again. Silence. For a full 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then my phone vibrated violently in my hand. Incoming call. Not unknown. Blocked. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. Stop, the voice said. Not loud. Not frantic. Flat. Male. Close enough that I could hear his breathing through the speaker. You're not listening, he said. You're not supposed to fight it. My throat felt tight, but I forced words out. You broke into my apartment. No, he said immediately. You let me. The words landed harder than they should have. You signed into your account on open Wi-Fi. You reused passwords. You set up Face ID and never checked alternate appearance. You installed that cheap camera and didn't secure it. His tone was clinical, like he was listing mistakes on a report. I never touched you, he continued. I never even stepped inside. The image of the boot flashed in my mind. That was you, I said, at my door. Silence, then softer. I just wanted to see if you'd open it. My stomach churned. You don't get to test me, I said. He exhaled, almost amused. You live alone, he said. You order groceries at the same time every Sunday. You leave the chain off because you forget. You keep your blinds half open at night. Every sentence was a photograph from the hidden phone. I felt something inside me go cold. You've been watching me for months, I said. Learning, he corrected. There it was, the private fear, being observed, managed, studied. I glanced toward the park entrance, empty, but the lamppost still stood there, casting a dull circle of light on wet concrete. You erased it, he said. There was strain in his voice now. You didn't have to do that. I did. You don't understand, he snapped, for the first time losing that careful tone. It was harmless, harmless. You were inside my account, I said. You put a camera in my apartment. It was just data, he insisted. A car door slammed somewhere behind me. Not close, but enough to make me flinch. Where are you? I demanded. A pause, then footsteps. Not through the phone, on the sidewalk, behind the SUV. My body reacted before my brain did. I spun around. He was closer than I expected. Mid-30s, maybe. White, dark jacket, hood up, average height. The kind of face you wouldn't remember in a lineup, not because it was forgettable, but because it was so normal. He held a phone in his right hand. My phone buzzed in my left. We stared at each other across 6 feet of wet pavement. You weren't supposed to come out here, he said. You told me to, I shot back. His mouth twitched. Curiosity, he said. You always had it. I didn't recognize him, which somehow made it worse. You don't know me, I said. I know enough, he replied. He took a step closer. I stepped back and nearly slipped on the wet concrete, catching myself against the SUV's door handle. He noticed. You're shaking, he said. So are you, I said, and he was. Slightly. His hand holding the phone trembled just enough that the screen light wobbled. Stood there, 2 strangers in the middle of a Seattle block at almost 3 a.m, both holding phones like weapons. You could have just left, he said. Changed your passwords. You didn't have to make it a thing. You made it a thing. He shook his head. You posted your life everywhere, stories, photos, check-ins. You left your digital door wide open. That's not consent, I said. He flinched slightly at that. I wasn't going to hurt you, he said, but you tried to get into my apartment. I just wanted to see if you'd notice. The statement hung in the damp air between us. Behind him, the park stretched quiet and empty. You're done, I said. My voice surprised me steady low. I removed your device. The police have the other phone. His eyes flickered. The police, yes, that was the crack. A tiny shift in posture, a flicker of calculation. You told them, he asked. Yes. For the first time, he looked unsure. That wasn't necessary, he muttered. You hid in my apartment, I said. It was necessary. I didn't go inside, he insisted. Then how did the phone get there? He hesitated. I sublet that unit 2 years ago, he said finally. Before you, the bookshelf, the panel. It could have been there since then. You left it, I asked. I forgot about it, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. 3 months of photos, I said. You forgot about that too. He didn't answer. Instead, he lunged. Not dramatically. Not like in a movie. A sudden step forward, hand reaching for my phone. Instinct kicked in. I jerked back, but my heel slid on the wet pavement. I went down hard, my hip slamming against concrete. Pain shot up my side. My phone skidded across the sidewalk, screen flashing. He moved toward it. I grabbed his ankle without thinking. He stumbled, cursing, and his own phone flew from his hand, clattering onto the street. Headlights flared at the end of the block. a car turning the corner. He looked toward it, panicked. I scrambled to my knees despite the pain in my hip and reached for his fallen phone instead of mine. He realized too late what I was doing. I snatched it up. Face ID prompt flashed. I angled it toward him. The lock icon flipped open. His face, recognized. The irony hit both of us at once. I swiped to settings and hit airplane mode. He lunged again, but I was already scrambling backward, dragging myself toward the SUV's far side. The car that had turned the corner slowed. A driver's silhouette visible behind the windshield. He froze. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Not right here yet, but closer. He looked at me, then at the approaching car, then down at his now disabled phone in my hand. "You don't get it," he said, breath ragged. "You'll just do it again. Someone will." "That's not your job," I said. He took one last step toward me, then stopped. The car honked once, sharp, confused. He swore under his breath. Then he ran. Not toward the park, away from it, down the block, disappearing between two apartment buildings. I stayed where I was for a moment, chest heaving, the cold seeping through my jeans. The sirens grew louder. My own phone lay a few feet away, screen cracked from the fall. I crawled to it, wincing as my hip protested. The screen still worked. Face ID unlocked again. But this time, it was just my face. Just me. I sat on the wet pavement, holding his phone in one hand and mine in the other, and felt something collapse inside me. Not relief exactly, but the end of a particular kind of not knowing. When the patrol car pulled up, I was still there, still shaking, still breathing, still alive, but not untouched. The patrol car lights washed the wet street in alternating red and blue. I was still sitting on the pavement when they got to me. The passing driver had slowed enough to ask if I needed help, then drove on when he saw the cruiser turning the corner. I don't remember answering him. Officer Morgan was the first one out of the car. "Ma'am," she said, kneeling down beside me. "Are you hurt?" "My hip," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I fell." She glanced at the phone in my hand. "Is that his?" "Yes." Ruiz came around the other side, scanning the block with his flashlight. "Which way did he go?" I pointed down the street, between two brick apartment buildings with narrow alleys that led nowhere good at 3 a.m. "He ran." Ruiz swore softly into his shoulder radio and relayed a description. Morgan helped me to my feet. When I stood, the pain flared hot and sharp along my left side. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from making a sound. "You're going to have a bruise," she said. "Maybe more. We'll get you checked out." "I'm okay," I insisted automatically. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that 100 times from people who weren't. They put me in the back of the cruiser, while Ruiz took the phone from me carefully, like it was fragile. I hated letting it go, but my fingers had started to cramp around it. The car smelled faintly of coffee and vinyl. My reflection in the partition glass looked smaller than I felt. Morgan turned in her seat. "You did the right thing removing the device from your account," she said. "That probably cut his remote access." "Probably," I echoed. "That was smart," she added. "It didn't feel smart. It felt impulsive. It felt like something I'd done because I couldn't stand the idea of him having even one more second of access." Ruiz came back a few minutes later. "Units are canvassing," he said. "We'll pull traffic cam footage at the corner. He might not have gotten far. Might." They took me to the hospital for a quick evaluation. It wasn't dramatic. No stretcher. No sirens. Just fluorescent lights and paperwork, and a nurse who asked if I'd hit my head. The X-ray showed a deep bruise and a hairline fracture in my pelvis. "You're lucky," the doctor said, scrolling through the images. "Could have been worse." That sentence stuck with me more than anything else. Could have been worse. It always could. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was almost 5 in the morning. The sky had started to lighten at the edges, turning the city into something gray and almost innocent. The front door looked the same. The hallway smelled the same. But when I unlocked my door and stepped inside, it didn't feel like my apartment anymore. Ruiz and Morgan had already been through it with a forensic tech while I was at the hospital. They'd dusted around the bookshelf, checked the door for prints, taken my laptop to scan for spyware. "Locks will be changed this morning," Ruiz said, standing near the doorway. "Management's cooperating." "They confirmed he sublet the unit 2 years ago," Morgan added. "Name S. Daniel Hargrove, 34, Daniel." The normal face on the sidewalk had a name now. "He didn't list any forwarding address when he moved out," Ruiz continued. "We'll find him." It sounded like a promise and a possibility at the same time. They handed me a thicker packet this time. Protective order paperwork, victim services information, a number to call if I noticed anything unusual. Unusual. The word felt inadequate. When they left, the apartment felt too quiet. I walked slowly through each room as if I were seeing it for the first time. The bookshelf panel was open, evidence of the techs having inspected it. The camera was back in place, but I unplugged it anyway. I couldn't look at it. In the kitchen, the knife I'd left on the counter was exactly where I'd dropped it earlier. In the bedroom, the duvet was twisted from where I'd thrown it off. Nothing had been physically destroyed, but everything felt disturbed. I sat on the edge of my bed and picked up my phone. The screen was cracked diagonally from when it hit the sidewalk. The fracture cut across the camera notch. Face ID unlocked. It felt almost insulting in its simplicity. Just my face, recognized. I went into settings. Apple ID, devices. Only one listed now. Mine. I changed the password again. Longer this time. Random. I enabled additional authentication. Turned off anything that felt optional. I set up Face ID from scratch, deleting the old profile entirely. When the oval appeared on the screen, asking me to move my head in a slow circle, I hesitated. I'd always liked the convenience of it, the seamlessness, the way the phone responded to me without effort. Now, as I rotated my head to map my features, I felt exposed in a way that was hard to articulate, as if I were volunteering pieces of myself to a system that had already proven porous. The setup completed. Locked the phone, unlocked it. It worked. Just me, just my face. Later that morning, management replaced the locks. The maintenance supervisor, a tired woman in her 40s named Angela, apologized 3 separate times, even though none of this was technically her fault. "We're reviewing all former tenant access," she said, "and we're checking common area cameras for when he might have been here." Might have. I nodded and thanked her. My hip throbbed every time I shifted my weight. The pain was grounding in a way. It reminded me that this had been physical, real, not just digital shadows. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop borrowed from a neighbor while mine was being scanned, and Googled things I wished I didn't have to know. How long can someone access your Apple ID without you knowing? How to tell if your home Wi-Fi is compromised? How common is digital stalking? The answers were clinical and unhelpful. Statistics. Steps. bullet points. None of them addressed the part where you feel like your walls are made of glass. Around noon, Morgan called. "We picked him up," she said. The words landed heavily. "Where?" "Bus stop on Aurora." He didn't resist. I closed my eyes. "Did he say anything?" He asked if you checked your blinds. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's it. They found no weapons on him, just a phone, a backup battery, a notebook with times and dates written in careful columns. He'd been methodical. He'd been patient. Charges would be filed: trespassing, harassment, computer crimes. The process would take time. When I hung up, I stood up slowly and walked to the living room window. The blinds were half open, just like he'd said. I reached up and pulled them shut. The slats clacked together with a flat, final sound. The apartment dimmed. For a moment, the darkness felt safer. In the days that followed, things returned to something like normal. I went back to work. I answered emails. I told a sanitized version of the story to coworkers who reacted with wide eyes and too much sympathy. At night, I double-checked the chain latch. Every time, I unplugged the security camera and boxed it up. I replaced my Wi-Fi router. I deleted apps I didn't recognize. The bruise on my hip turned deep purple, then yellow, then faded. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time my phone screen lit up in the dark, even for a calendar reminder, my body jolted awake. Every Face ID unlock felt like a small test. Recognize me, or don't. One evening, about a week later, I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed on the counter. Just a normal notification. A news alert. I rinsed my mouth and picked it up. Face ID unlocked. The screen opened to my home screen. Nothing unusual. But for a split second, so brief, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. The lock icon at the top didn't flip open smoothly. It hesitated, just a fraction of a second longer than usual, like it was thinking. I stood there, toothbrush still in my hand, staring at my own reflection in the dark glass. It unlocked, just me, just my face. I set the phone down slowly. Across the room, the blinds were fully closed. The chain was latched. The new deadbolt clicked firmly into place when I tested it. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on damp pavement. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary night. I went to bed with the lights off, but the phone face down on the nightstand this time. Not because I thought it would unlock on its own again, but because I didn't want to see it try. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. Welcome back to Mia Horror Stories. Tonight's tale, I found a second set of footprints following me in fresh snow, is best experienced in the dark, which is why the screen will stay black. No distractions, no flashing images, just you, your imagination, and the story. So sit back, relax, and listen all the way to the end if you dare. The first thing that didn't fit was the spacing. Not the size, not the shape, just the distance between each step, like whoever made them had a longer stride than mine, or they were in a hurry, or they were trying to match me and kept getting it slightly wrong. I stopped at the bend where the trail drops toward the frozen creek, my breath making a small white pulse in front of my face. Snow had come down clean and steady since late afternoon, the kind that makes everything look newly packaged. No grit, no footprints at the parking lot except mine. No tire tracks except the ones from my Subaru that were already starting to soften at the edges. My prints were there in a single line boots, left, right, left, the little crescent where my heel bit in harder because I favored my right ankle when it got cold. And then, just to the left of them, a second set. Not overlapping, not crossing, just alongside, following the same curve of the trail with enough distance that someone could be walking behind me and still stay out of my peripheral vision. If I turned my head too quickly, all I saw were trunks and snow and the weak winter light. Okay, I said out loud, because the sound of my voice kept my brain in the world. Okay, that's probably someone came in after me. But that didn't make sense either. Fresh snow tells on you. That was the whole point of why I liked coming out here when it snowed. It made the trail honest. It made the usual mess of the world trash, noise, old footprints, dog tracks disappear. I heard nothing except a faint rushing that could have been wind moving through pine needles or water under ice. The kind of sound you can't locate. No crunch of snow behind me. No cough. No clink of a zipper pull. No whisper of fabric. When I turned and looked back up the trail, the two lines of prints disappeared around the next curve in the same direction I'd come from. Like the trail itself had made them and was now pretending it hadn't. My phone was in my pocket, screen dark, battery at 62%. I knew that because I'd checked it at the trailhead out of habit, the way you check the stove twice, even though you watched the flame turn off. I pulled it out anyway, and the cold made it sluggish, the screen dimmer than it should have been even with the brightness up. The map app spun for a second, and then settled, showing the trail like a thin scribble through a big green block. No signal bars, just SOS in the corner. The kind of comfort that isn't comfort at all. I didn't like being without a signal. I told myself I did, that it was good for my head, that it was why I came. But the truth was I liked the idea that I could reach someone if I needed to. I liked the illusion of a line tethering me to other people, even if I didn't use it. I forced myself to breathe slower. I took one step forward, then another, listening for any change in the snow. The sound of your own boots is a weird thing. It's intimate. It's a little too loud, like you're doing something wrong just by existing. 2 minutes earlier, my biggest worry had been whether the flask of coffee in my pack would still be warm when I got to the overlook. That's what I'd told myself anyway. That, and whether the clouds would open up enough to give me a view of the valley. Now I couldn't stop counting. 1, 2, 3, stop, turn, look. The second set of prints didn't change. They stayed beside mine, always beside. And that made my stomach feel like I'd swallowed something small and sharp. I'm not someone who panics easily. I work in a place where you can't afford it. My name is Maya Klein, 32, female, and I live in a split-level rental outside Bellingham, Washington, where everything gets wet in the winter, and the cold sneaks up on you because it isn't dramatic about it. I do scheduling and dispatch for a small company that handles plumbing and emergency restoration, floods, broken pipes, that kind of thing. The people I talk to are usually either annoyed or terrified. I'm good at being the calm voice. I'm good at asking the right questions and keeping my own feelings in a drawer. My private flaw, if you want to call it, that is I don't like asking for help until I'm already in trouble. I grew up learning how to be fine in a way that became reflex. And even now, when I know better, I hesitate. I'll sit with a problem and try to solve it quietly, alone, because the idea of needing someone makes my throat tighten. Which is why, standing there on that trail with 2 sets of footprints in fresh snow, my first impulse wasn't to call anyone. It was to prove to myself I was misunderstanding what I saw. I crouched down. The snow squeaked under my knees. I brushed away the soft top layer with the edge of my glove, exposing the compressed print underneath. My boot tread wide grooves and little chevrons was clear. Next to it, the other print was narrower, the tread pattern different. Not a dog, not a deer, not a kid, adult shoe, maybe a hiking boot, maybe a work boot. The edges were crisp, new. If someone had walked there hours ago, it would have already softened, the way the other tracks at the trailhead were starting to. These looked like they'd been made minutes behind me. I stood up too fast, and my pack shifted. The weight reminded me what I'd brought, like inventorying could anchor me. Water, coffee, a headlamp, a compact first aid kit. Because I'd promised my mother I would always carry one after she found out about the time I sliced my palm on broken glass and wrapped it in a dish towel like an idiot. A small folding knife, a whistle on a cheap orange lanyard I'd never used. I didn't carry a gun. I didn't carry bear spray because it was winter and the bears were supposed to be asleep. And besides, it was always the supposed to that got people hurt. I started walking again, more quickly now, trying to keep it casual like my body wouldn't betray me. The air had that metallic cold smell, like damp pennies. The forest wasn't silent. It was full of small noises that didn't mean anything until you decided they did. Branches ticking, snow settling, the faint creak of a trunk shifting in wind. Every so often a chunk of snow slipped from a limb and fell with a soft thump that made me flinch anyway. I came around the next curve and saw something that should have comforted me. A signpost up ahead, one of the brown wooden ones with trail names burned into the plank. Civilization, in the loosest sense. It meant I wasn't as deep as I felt, but it also meant there might be other people. The logical part of me tried to latch onto that. Maybe someone had entered from the other spur trail and was walking the same direction. Maybe they were just keeping to the side because they didn't want to step in my prints. The way hikers sometimes avoid stepping where others have packed the snow down. I could call out, "Hey, make it normal." I didn't, because I'd done this trail enough times to know that spur trail was half a mile back, and the snow between there and here had no crossing tracks. There was no place where the second set joined mine. It was simply there, like it had been with me from the moment I left my car. A memory came up, uninvited. My neighbor in the rental next to mine, telling me last month about someone stealing packages off porches in our subdivision. She laughed when she said it, but she'd also installed a camera the next day. I'd nodded and said I'd do the same. I hadn't. My phone buzzed once, which was so surprising my hands jerked, and I nearly dropped it. The screen lit up with a notification that didn't load. Something about trying to connect to emergency satellite. A little message that might have meant something useful if I'd been able to open it. I stared at the SOS in the corner again and felt a wash of annoyance that was mostly fear, trying to disguise itself. "Come on," I muttered, like the phone was being stubborn on purpose. The signpost came into view. The snow around it was untouched except for mine and the other set. The letters on the wood were rimmed with white. The trail names were familiar. Pine Ridge Loop to the left, Creek Spur down and right, Overlook straight ahead another mile. I stopped at the signpost and turned slowly, giving myself the excuse to check directions while really scanning the trees. The light was already thinning, turning everything a blue-gray. My headlamp was still in my pack, and I could feel the first edge of that internal debate. Put it on now and admit I was worried, or wait and risk needing it later in a rush. I listened. Still nothing human. But the second prints stopped when I stopped, as if whoever made them had paused too. A tiny thing, a detail that wasn't even a sound, and it made my skin prickle across the back of my neck. I forced myself to do something I hate, not just think, but decide. Option 1, turn around, go back the way I came. Back toward the car, toward the parking lot, toward the road that leads back into town where there are lights and other cars, and a gas station with a bored teenager behind the counter. Option 2, keep going to the Overlook. There's a small shelter there, a covered bench. Sometimes other hikers, sometimes families, even in winter. If someone is behind me and weirdly committed to staying hidden, heading toward a more open space might be safer, unless it makes me predictable, unless it puts me farther from my car. I pictured myself walking back down the trail with my back exposed and the second prints closing the gap. My throat tightened. My mouth tasted faintly of coffee and toothpaste. I pulled the whistle out of my pocket, rolled it between my gloved fingers. Cheap plastic. I'd bought it online in a pack of 3, the kind of purchase you make when you're trying to be responsible in the most minimal way possible. I looked at my phone again. No bars. The cold was making it lag. I could still dial 911, but that meant trusting the SOS and hoping the call would go through somehow. I almost laughed at myself. Almost, because what would I even say? Hi, I'm on a trail and there are footprints that might be following me. A dispatcher would ask if I saw someone, if I heard someone, if I was injured, if there was an immediate threat. I would have to admit I didn't know. I would have to admit it could be nothing. That's where my flaw lived, in the fear of sounding foolish. I stood at the signpost long enough that the cold started to bite through my gloves, and that physical discomfort made it easier. Pain is simple. It doesn't negotiate. I took a breath. I turned my head toward the straight path labeled Overlook, and then toward the left branch, Pine Ridge Loop, which would eventually circle back closer to the parking area, but would keep me in trees longer. The second set of prints beside mine didn't vote. They waited. I tightened the strap of my pack. I pushed my phone back into my pocket to keep it warmer. I reached into my bag and pulled out the headlamp, sliding the elastic over my beanie. I didn't turn it on yet. That felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross. At the fork, I stood still and let my mind run the 2 paths like a quick simulation, the way I do at work when someone calls with water pouring through a ceiling, and I'm trying to decide which crew can get there fastest. The loop would keep me closer to the car. The Overlook might put me near other people, or it might put me alone on a ridge with a view and nowhere to go but back down. I made myself pick. And the moment my boot angled toward one trail, the moment I committed my weight and felt the snow compress under me, I understood something else that nudged the unease into something sharper. Whatever was making those other prints had been patient. And now it had a direction too. I chose the loop. It wasn't brave, It was practical. Pine Ridge would eventually arc back toward the parking lot without taking me as far out as the overlook. If someone was behind me, I wanted my car between us. I wanted doors and an engine, and the familiar smell of old coffee in the cup holder. The trail narrowed as it climbed, the trees pressing closer. The snow was still coming down in thin, slanted threads, not enough to blur the prints yet, but enough that I could imagine it doing so soon. That gave the whole situation a timer I hadn't asked for. If it kept up, the tracks would vanish, and then I wouldn't know if they were still there. I walked faster. The second set walked faster too, not by much, just enough that the spacing between the prints shortened slightly, like whoever made them had adjusted to match my pace. I stopped. They stopped. I turned slowly, forcing myself not to spin like prey. The trail behind me curved and dipped, the snow unbroken except for the 2 parallel lines of steps. My breathing was too loud in my ears. The forest didn't offer me anything, no silhouette, no shift of movement, just the layered trunks, black against white. "Hey," I called. My voice sounded small, swallowed almost immediately. "If you're behind me, I can hear you. You don't have to do this." The word hung there, inadequate. Nothing. I stood long enough that my toes began to ache inside my boots. I could feel the pulse in my ankle, the old sprain flaring under the cold. The smart move would have been to turn around and head straight back to the parking lot. No more experiments. But something else threaded through the fear, stubbornness, the need to understand. If someone was following me, why stay silent? Why not close the distance? Why not announce themselves? The prints were too clean to be accidental, too consistent to be random. And there was still no joining point, no place where they merged from another trail. My phone buzzed again. This time the screen loaded just enough to show a text from Ryan Mercer, 34 male, my neighbor across the street. We weren't close, but we shared a snow shovel and occasionally trash cans when the wind knocked them over. "You hiking today? Saw your car at Pine Ridge lot." I stared at it. The timing made my scalp tighten. I typed back with fingers that felt clumsy in the gloves. "Yeah, just started the loop." "Why?" The message spun. Sending, then nothing. I stepped off the packed center of the trail deliberately, into untouched snow, making a new line at a sharp angle. My boots sank deeper there, the powder colder against the sides. If the second set continued straight, I could tell myself I'd misread the spacing. If it turned with me, then I waited. The forest waited. Then, a few yards back, the other prints veered. Clean, deliberate, matching the angle I'd just taken. My stomach tightened so fast it almost hurt. "Okay," I said, but this time it wasn't for the forest. It was for me. "Okay, that's enough." I pulled the whistle up and blew. The sound cut through the trees in a sharp, metallic blast that startled even me. It bounced weirdly, thin and echoing. I blew again, 3 short bursts the way the little card that came with it had instructed for emergencies. Nothing answered, except, faintly, the crunch of snow, not from directly behind. Off to my right, a few yards into the trees. I froze, every muscle locked. The crunch came again, closer this time. Not wind, not falling snow, a measured step. "Who's there?" I called, the question cracking at the end. There was a pause long enough that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Then a voice, male, mid-distance, calm in a way that felt practiced. "Didn't mean to scare you." He didn't step onto the trail right away. The voice came from between trees, not from where the prints were. I wasn't trying to scare you, he added, like that clarified anything. Then why are you walking behind me? I asked. My grip on the whistle tightened until the plastic edge dug into my palm. A rustle, the outline of a person shifting. Finally, he stepped into the open. He looked ordinary in the way that makes your brain stall. Early 40s, maybe. Dark jacket, gray knit hat, beard that had more salt than pepper. He wasn't out of breath. He didn't look embarrassed. I wasn't walking behind you, he said, and gestured vaguely at the snow. Trail's narrow. I stayed to the side so I wouldn't step in your tracks. That doesn't explain why they started at the same time as mine. He tilted his head slightly, like he was considering that as a puzzle rather than an accusation. Snow can play tricks, he said. I came in from the overlook side. Maybe you just didn't see where they joined. That's not possible, I said, sharper than I meant to. I know this trail. His mouth twitched at that. Not quite a smile. Okay, the quiet that followed wasn't comfortable. It felt like we were both waiting for the other to make the next move. Up close, I could see his boots. Black, heavy tread. I looked down at the print near his foot, and then at the one I'd crouched over earlier. They matched. Same narrow cut. Same angular pattern. My throat felt dry. I don't have service, I said, partly to fill the air, partly because it was true. If you're going to keep walking this way, maybe just walk ahead of me. His eyes flicked past me, down the trail, calculating. I'm actually headed back to the parking lot, he said. Car won't start. Battery's dead. I was hoping someone would come along. There it was, concrete, mundane, the kind of problem that fits in the world. You don't have a charger, I asked. No signal to call roadside, he said. And my jumper cables are in my garage. Brilliant planning on my part. The words were self-deprecating, but his tone didn't quite match. It was too even. So you were just waiting, I asked. He shrugged. Figured I'd see if someone came down from the other side. And instead you followed me. I didn't follow you. We held eye contact a second too long. The wind shifted, carrying a faint smell of something chemical, gasoline, maybe, or oil. It could have been from the parking lot, drifting this way. Or it could have been my imagination latching onto the idea of a broken car. What's your name? I asked. Tom, he said without hesitation. Tom Keller. He didn't offer an age, didn't ask mine. I considered the math. If his car was dead at the lot and he needed a jump, that was reasonable. I had cables in my trunk. I'd bought them after my battery died in a grocery store lot last year, and I'd had to ask a stranger for help, which I'd hated. Here was my flaw, staring back at me in the shape of a choice. If I turned and walked away, I'd look paranoid. I'd leave someone stranded in the cold. If I agreed, I'd be walking back to a mostly empty parking lot with a man I didn't know who had already been comfortable staying out of sight. You can walk ahead, I said finally. We'll go back to the lot together. He nodded, like that was the most reasonable arrangement in the world, and stepped past me. I let him get 10 feet ahead before I followed. The walk back was quiet at first. The snow muffled our steps, but not completely. I could hear his boots compressing the crust. Steady, controlled, not the uneven rhythm of someone anxious. Where you from? He asked over his shoulder. Here, I said, Bellingham. Live alone. The question slid into the air too smoothly. I didn't answer right away. Why does that matter? Just making conversation, he said. Trail etiquette. Break the ice. Let's not, I said. He gave a small chuckle. It didn't reach his eyes. As we rounded the bend where I'd first noticed the prints, I saw something that made my pulse spike all over again. There were more tracks now, not just ours. A third set, smaller, lighter. They crossed the trail from the trees on the left and then vanished into the woods on the right. Fresh enough that the edges were still sharp. Tom slowed when he saw them. "Looks like we're not the only ones," he said. "You said you came from the overlook," I said carefully. "Did you see anyone else?" "Nope." The third set didn't follow us. They cut across and disappeared. No sign of where they'd come from, no obvious destination. The snow was coming down harder now, softening everything at the edges. My phone buzzed again. This time Ryan's message went through. "My brother's up there too. Said some guy was acting weird near the lot." "You okay?" I stopped walking. Tom took 2 more steps before he realized I wasn't behind him. He turned slowly. "You good?" he asked. I didn't answer him. I stared at the screen, at the words, at the small blinking cursor in the corner. "Who's texting you?" he asked. I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my pocket. "Friend," I said. "He's on his way to the lot." A lie. I didn't know if Ryan was coming. I didn't know if his brother was even real. Tom's jaw tightened just slightly. A muscle flicked near his ear. "Well," he said after a beat, "that's convenient." We were maybe half a mile from the parking lot. The light was fading faster now, the trees swallowing what little glow the sky offered. If his car was really dead, we'd be standing in an empty lot with darkness settling in and no guarantee of help arriving soon. And now there was the third set of prints to consider. "I'm not sure it's safe to go straight back," I said slowly. Tom's expression shifted, confusion first, then something sharper. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, choosing each word, "if there's someone else out here and they're cutting across trails, maybe we shouldn't just assume the lot's empty." "You think someone else waiting there?" he asked. "I don't know what I think." He looked at me for a long second, weighing something. Then he glanced toward the trees where the third tracks had disappeared. "We could take the creek spur," he said. "Cuts down behind the lot. Come up from the side." The suggestion made sense geographically. It also meant stepping off the main trail into a narrower, less maintained path that dipped toward the frozen creek and out of sight of the open ridge. Deeper into trees, lower ground, fewer sightlines. "You know this trail well," he added, not a question. My headlamp was still off. The light around us was thinning to a dull blue. The snow was erasing edges, and somewhere between us and the parking lot, someone else had walked across our path. I realized something then, a small but important detail. If Tom had truly come from the overlook, his prints should have been facing toward the lot when I first saw them. They were. They had been aligned exactly with mine. I felt the weight of the choice settle again, heavier this time. Stay on the main trail toward the lot and risk whatever might be waiting. Or follow Tom down the creek spur into thicker trees, on the word of a man whose story didn't quite line up. The snow was coming down faster now, already softening the third set of tracks. Whatever answer the ground had, it wasn't going to hold it for long. Tom took a step toward the creek spur. "Well," he said, and I understood that whichever direction I chose, I wouldn't be walking out of this the same way I'd walked in. I didn't follow him down the creek spur. Not immediately. "Wait," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Before we go anywhere, let's just try the lot. It's closer." Tom's mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. Fine. We stayed on Pine Ridge, heading downhill now. The parking lot sat at the base of the loop, a small clearing carved out of the trees, maybe 8 spaces wide. From there, A gravel access road ran half a mile to the main county road. I could picture it clearly. The wooden kiosk with the faded map, the metal trash can chained to a post, my blue Subaru angled near the far edge because I liked space around it. The snow thickened as we walked. It didn't fall in flakes anymore, it sifted. Soft, steady. The third set of prints we'd seen earlier were already losing definition. Tom walked a few paces ahead, not too far, just enough that I couldn't see his face without speeding up. "You hike here often?" he asked without turning. "Sometimes. Alone. Sometimes." He let that sit. The sound of our boots pressing into snow had become hypnotic. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Every so often a branch snapped somewhere deeper in the trees, the wood brittle from cold. The trail curved left, and the trees thinned slightly. Through them, I could see a faint gray openness that meant we were close to the lot. My phone vibrated again. No new text, just a low battery warning. 40% now. The cold was draining it faster than it should. We stepped out of the trees into the clearing. The parking lot was almost empty. My Subaru was there. A dark pickup truck I didn't recognize sat near the kiosk, backed in close to the snowbank. Its bed was dusted white. No lights on. No exhaust from the tailpipe. Tom stopped walking. "That's not mine," he said. "Where's yours?" "Other side," he said, and pointed toward the far edge of the lot, partially obscured by trees. We crossed the clearing together. The snow in the lot was disturbed, tire tracks that hadn't been there when I arrived, looping and messy. Footprints too. Multiple. Harder to read now because vehicles had churned the surface. Tom's car, a gray Honda Civic, sat crooked near the edge, nose angled slightly toward the woods like it had slid when he parked. The hood was closed. No obvious damage. "Battery's dead," he said again. I stood a few feet back. "Pop the hood." He hesitated a fraction of a second before pulling the latch and lifting it. The engine bay looked normal, cold. I wasn't a mechanic, but nothing seemed obviously wrong. I moved toward my Subaru slowly, unlocking it with the key fob. The lights blinked. The sound echoed too loudly in the clearing. My plan was simple: get the jumper cables, keep space between us, stay alert. But as I opened my trunk, I noticed something that tightened my chest. The snow directly behind my car was disturbed, not just from me unloading earlier. There were fresh prints there. Not mine. Not Tom's heavy boot tread either. These were smaller, lighter, like the third set we'd seen on the trail. They led up to the back of my car and stopped. "Did you come over here before?" I asked without turning. "No," I crouched, ignoring the way my knee protested, and examined them. The prints faced the rear hatch, close, almost touching the bumper. I straightened slowly. My trunk had been closed when I arrived. I was sure of that. I'd grabbed my pack and locked the car. But the hatch now sat not fully latched, just slightly off, like it hadn't sealed properly. A thin line of cold air brushed my face as I lifted it fully. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance: blanket, ice scraper, reusable grocery bags. Then I saw the small orange emergency kit I kept tucked into the side compartment. Unzipped. I hadn't touched it in months. "Something wrong," Tom called from near his car. I stared at the kit. The zipper teeth were uneven. Inside, the contents looked rummaged through. Flashlight slightly shifted. Road flares disturbed. "I think someone has been in my car," I said. He stepped closer. Too close. "Let me see." "I'm good," I said quickly, pulling the jumper cables out. My hands shook now, not from cold. "That's weird," he said. "You sure you closed it?" "Yes." He studied me for a second. "Maybe whoever owns that truck." We both looked toward the dark pickup near the kiosk. Its windows were tinted. No movement inside. The truck hadn't been there when I arrived. A sudden metallic thud made both of us jump. It came from inside Tom's car. We froze. The sound came again, louder. A hollow, resonant bang from the rear of the Civic. The trunk. Tom stared at it, eyes wide for the first time. "That's not funny," he muttered, though neither of us had laughed. Another bang, harder. For a split second, my brain leapt to the worst place. Someone trapped. Someone trying to get out. Tom stepped back. "Did you lock someone in there?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked genuinely startled. "What? No." The banging grew frantic. My pulse hammered so loudly I could hear it. "Pop it," I said. He didn't move. "Pop it," I repeated, sharper now. He fumbled for his keys and hit the trunk release. The lid sprang up with a metallic snap, and a blur of gray and white exploded out. I screamed. Tom swore. A raccoon, huge, fur matted with snow, launched from the trunk, scrambling across the lot in a frantic, hissing dash. It disappeared into the trees in seconds. We stood there, breathing hard. The trunk interior was torn, plastic lining clawed, a bag of something shredded. "Must have climbed in when I left it open," Tom said, still catching his breath. "I was unloading firewood earlier." It was a plausible explanation. The lot bordered dense trees, animals looking for warmth. My heart slowly began to settle, though my legs felt watery. That's good," I said weakly. "Better than the alternative." He let out a shaky laugh, but as the adrenaline faded, something else crept in. The raccoon had been locked inside his trunk, which meant he had, at some point, closed it with the animal in there. He said he'd come from the overlook side. He said his car battery was dead, but the interior light of the trunk had been on when it popped open. Bright enough to see clearly. "Try your car," I said. "What?" "Start it." He blinked. "It's dead. Just try." He hesitated, then slid into the driver's seat. The door shut with a solid thud. The engine turned over immediately. No hesitation, no sluggishness, just a clean ignition. The headlights came on. We stared at each other through the windshield. He killed the engine slowly and stepped out. "Must have been loose cable," he said. I didn't answer. Attempt one to simply leave together had just unraveled. "Look," he said, stepping closer again. We're both a little on edge. Snow does weird things. "Let's just..." The pickup truck's engine roared to life behind us. We both spun. The headlights flared on, blinding in the dim lot. The truck reversed slightly, tires crunching over packed snow. My stomach dropped. The truck had been empty, or at least it had looked empty. The driver's side window rolled down halfway. I couldn't see the driver clearly, just a shadowed outline. "Everything good?" a voice called out. Male, younger than Tom. Tom didn't answer. I stepped forward, raising my voice. "Do you know this guy?" The truck idled. The driver's silhouette shifted. Then, abruptly, the truck pulled forward and angled toward the exit road. For 1 second, relief flooded me. Then it slowed near the entrance and stopped, blocking the narrow gravel access road. Snow continued to fall, thicker now, softening edges, muting sound. The lot suddenly felt smaller, hemmed in by trees and vehicles. "Probably just turning around," Tom said, but his tone had changed. Less certain. The truck didn't turn around. It idled. Exhaust drifted upward, visible in the headlights. "Get in your car," Tom said quietly. "Why?" "'Cause if they're blocking the road, We need to leave now. My brain tried to catch up. You just said, get in, he snapped. There it was, the edge, the trap tightening. I stepped backward toward my Subaru instead of forward. My keys were still in my hand. Tom moved toward his Civic. For a second, I thought we might both just drive off two separate vehicles, two separate paths. But as I opened my door, I heard the sound that sealed it. The pickup shifted into gear and began creeping backward, toward us. Not fast, just enough to close distance. The access road was now completely blocked. The truck angled slightly, positioning itself between the lot and the only exit. Snow thickened, visibility dropping. My tires were already partially buried from sitting. I slid into the driver's seat, hands shaking. Turned the key. The engine started. Good. I threw it into reverse. The tires spun immediately, rubber whining against packed snow. I eased off, tried again slower. They caught briefly, then slid sideways. The truck kept creeping. Tom's Civic roared as he attempted to back up too. He fishtailed, correcting sharply. The truck's headlights flared brighter as it angled closer. Drive, Tom shouted from somewhere to my left. I can't get traction. My car lurched sideways, the rear end sliding toward a snowbank. The truck stopped moving. Then the driver's door opened. A figure stepped out. I couldn't see his face clearly in the falling snow, but I saw something else. A second set of boot prints emerging from the driver's side. Narrow tread. The same pattern I'd seen beside mine from the beginning. The realization hit like a physical blow. There hadn't been one follower. There had been two. And now the only road out was blocked, the snow deepening, the daylight gone. Retreat wasn't an option anymore. The truck door hung open like a mouth. Snow blew into the cab in thin sheets. The driver stood with his shoulders slightly hunched against the cold, one hand on the edge of the open door, the other down near his pocket. Tom was 20 yards away by his Civic, half turned between me and the truck, like he couldn't decide which direction he belonged in. His headlights washed the lot in a harsh cone, turning the falling snow into a swarm. I kept my foot lightly on the brake. Engine running. Reverse engaged. Tires sunk and spinning, had already polished a little patch of ice under them. If I punched it, I'd just dig deeper. Think, map. The lot was a shallow rectangle, trees on three sides. One narrow access road out blocked. Kiosk at the entrance with a roof that shed snow in lazy slides. My Subaru at the far edge, backed toward a snowbank. Tom's Civic near the tree line. The pickup angled across the mouth of the road like a barricade. I reached down and killed my headlights. The sudden dimness made my eyes sting, but it also did something else. It took away the easy target, took away the stage lighting. In the truck's glare, my car was now just a dark shape. My headlamp sat on my beanie, still off. I could feel the elastic pressing into my forehead. My whistle was in my pocket. My folding knife was buried in my pack. My phone was in my jacket, 40% and dropping. No bars except that stupid SOS. I imagined dialing, and the call never connecting. Imagined explaining footprints to a dispatcher in a warm room. My throat tightened around the old fear. Don't make a fuss. Don't look stupid. The truck driver took a step forward. Hey, he called, voice carrying in the cold. You're fine. We're not trying to hurt you. It was a ridiculous sentence. It landed wrong, too early in the conversation for that. Tom turned his head sharply toward him, like don't say that, but he didn't correct it. The driver tried again. We just need to talk. I laughed once, short and ugly, and surprised myself. "Move your truck," I said loud enough that my voice felt exposed in the open lot. "Move it, and you can talk from the road." The driver didn't move. Tom started walking toward me, palms up, his gait careful, like he was approaching a skittish animal. "Don't," I said. He stopped. "Listen," Tom said. His breath made a dense cloud in front of his face. "It got weird. I know it looks weird, but this doesn't have to escalate." "You lied about your battery," I said. "You lied about where you came from." His eyes flicked down, then up. "I didn't, you did," I cut in. My voice was louder now, sharper. "You were following me." The driver shifted behind him, watching, not rushing, like he had time. Time was the thing they had, and I didn't. The snow was still falling. It was already filling my tire treads, packing in where rubber needed grip. The longer I sat, the worse it would get. I forced myself to look at the access road itself. The truck blocked it, yes, but it was gravel beneath snow. A slight slope down toward the county road. On either side were shallow ditches, not deep ravines, just low cuts to guide water in spring. If I could get momentum, maybe I could angle around the truck. Maybe I could bump into the ditch and still make it past. Maybe I'd high center and be stuck worse. The other option, go deeper into the trees, on foot, back onto the trail network. But that meant leaving the car, leaving the only real shelter and warmth I had. And it meant being hunted among trunks. I grabbed my phone and unlocked it, hands trembling. I hit the emergency call. The screen froze for half a second, then showed emergency SOS connecting. The sound from the speaker was not a reassuring ring. It was a thin chirp and then silence. "Come on," I whispered. Tom saw the glow of my screen and his expression changed, something tight and annoyed. The truck driver took 2 quick steps forward. "Don't do that," he said. The command snapped something in me, the part that always tries to smooth things over, always tries to avoid making a scene. I shoved the door open and stepped out, leaving the car running. Cold slapped my face. Snowflakes stuck to my eyelashes instantly. I lifted the whistle and blew hard. The sound stabbed the air. It bounced off the kiosk roof, off the truck, off the tree line. It didn't just announce me, it owned the space for a second. I blew again. 3 blasts. The driver flinched and swore. Tom's hands flew to his ears, then dropped, angry. "Stop, move the truck," I yelled over the whistle's echo. Now, the driver looked at Tom. Tom looked back. A fast exchange with no words. Then the driver did something that answered the question I hadn't wanted to ask. He reached into the cab and pulled out a crowbar. Not a gun, not a knife. Something you can explain away if you get stopped. Something you can use on a locked door. Something you can use on a person if you have to. My body reacted before my brain finished the thought. I backed toward my open driver's door, keeping the car between us. Tom started moving again. "Maya," I froze. "How do you know my name?" His mouth opened, closed. For a beat, he looked genuinely caught. The driver's eyes narrowed. His grip tightened on the crowbar. My stomach turned. Ryan had texted me, "Saw your car at Pine Ridge Lot." That meant someone else had seen it too. Someone who didn't need to know me to find me. Someone who could watch the lot and wait for a lone hiker to come back. My mind flashed to my trunk, not fully latched. The unzipped emergency kit. The smaller prints right at my bumper. They had been there while I was on the trail, while I thought the only danger was behind me. They'd checked my car, maybe looking for keys, maybe looking for something valuable, maybe looking for proof I was alone. I stopped trying to interpret motive. It didn't matter. What mattered was the practical reality. 2 men, 1 truck blocking the exit, snow falling harder, fading light. "Get back in your car," Tom said, voice low, urgent now. "Just let's calm down. We don't want to, I repeated. The word tasted like metal. The driver started walking toward my Subaru, crowbar hanging at his side like it weighed nothing. Tom angled to my left, cutting off the path between me and the open lot. They were splitting me. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. They just needed me to panic and slip and fall and get tangled in my own fear. My right ankle pulsed, a warning. If I ran wrong, it would go. I forced myself to stop backing up and look. The jumper cables, they were in my hand. I'd pulled them out earlier and never put them away. Heavy clamps, thick rubber-coated wire. A stupid weapon, but a real one. Something with reach. Something that could buy a second. I yanked one clamp free and held it like a flail, cable coiled around my wrist. Tom's eyes flicked to it. "Don't," the driver laughed once short. "Seriously." I blew the whistle again, just once sharp. Not for rescue now, for focus. For the part of me that needed a cue to act. Then I moved, not toward the road, toward the kiosk. The kiosk wasn't safety, but it was structure. A roof, a post, a barrier. Something to put my back against that wasn't open air. The snow under my boots was slick where cars had compacted it. I felt my right foot slide and caught myself, adrenaline spiking. The driver lunged, finally abandoning patience, and I swung the clamp. It hit his forearm with a dull thud. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just bone meeting hard plastic and metal. He yelped and the crowbar dipped. I didn't stop to see how much it hurt. I kept moving. Tom came at me from the side, trying to grab my arm. He got a fistful of my jacket sleeve. The fabric pulled tight across my shoulder. Pain shot down my arm. "Stop," he hissed. I twisted, yanked, and the seam tore with a ripping sound that felt huge in the cold. My sleeve came partly free, leaving my forearm exposed to snow and air. I stumbled, caught the kiosk post with my shoulder, and slammed my palm onto the map board. The plastic cover over the trail map was cracked. The edge lifted slightly. Under it, paper swelled with moisture. There was a metal box mounted on the side of the kiosk, one of those emergency supply boxes some trailheads have, meant for brochures, and sometimes a little logbook. I'd never paid attention to it before. My fingers found the latch. It was locked. Of course it was locked. The driver recovered and charged again, crowbar up now, his face visible for the first time, young, flushed, eyes too bright with the kind of excitement that doesn't belong in a snowstorm. He swung. I ducked. The crowbar smashed into the kiosk roof support with a crack that vibrated through the wood. Splinters rained down. Tom grabbed me from behind, arms wrapping around my chest, pinning my elbows. My breath whooshed out. Panic surged so fast it was almost nausea. "Quit fighting," he said in my ear. "Just quit and you'll be okay." It was the same lie people tell when they're already doing harm. I tried to stomp his foot and my ankle screamed. The old injury flared sharp, a hot line of pain that made my vision flicker. Tom tightened his grip, taking advantage. The driver stepped closer, crowbar raised, and in that instant, I understood what they were going to do. Disable me, quietly, get me down, then decide what came next. There wasn't going to be a clean negotiation. My mouth tasted like copper. I forced air into my lungs and screamed, not words, just sound. Then I blew the whistle again, right beside my own face, the shriek so loud it felt like it cracked my skull. Tom jerked back instinctively, his grip loosening. I shoved backward hard, driving my weight into him. My shoulders slammed his chest. He stumbled. I turned and swung the cable clamp again, not at the driver this time, but at Tom's face. The clamp caught his cheekbone with a sickening pop. He made a noise that wasn't a shout, more like a grunt that got stuck halfway out. He fell to one knee, hands flying to his face. The driver surged forward, crowbar coming down. I threw myself sideways. The crowbar caught my shoulder instead of my head. Pain exploded white, immediate, not something you think through. It stole my breath. My arm went numb and then burned, like someone had poured hot water under my skin. I fell hard into the snow, the impact knocking the wind out of me. For a second, the world narrowed to the sound of my own rasping inhale and the distant idle of the truck engine. The driver loomed above me. Tom was on his knees, blood dark against the snow, holding his face, eyes wild with rage and something like disbelief. The driver lifted the crowbar again. My fingers fumbled for anything at my waist. My pack. The strap was still across me. I yanked it open with my good hand, blind with pain, and my fingers hit the folding knife. I snapped it open. The motion was clumsy. My hand shook. The driver hesitated, recalculating. Not fear, just risk assessment. He took a step back, crowbar still up, and in that moment, I saw his forearm swelling where I'd hit it. Tom spat something red into the snow and stood, unsteady. "You stupid," he started. A sound cut through them both. A car horn. Not close, but close enough to snap heads. Then headlights appeared at the far end of the access road, down by the county road, where the slope dipped. A vehicle had stopped there, unable to come up the blocked path. Someone was there. The truck driver turned sharply toward the road. Tom turned too, eyes narrowing. Relief hit me so hard it almost made me cry, but it tangled immediately with fear because I saw what they saw. Whoever had arrived couldn't drive up because the pickup was blocking the mouth of the road, which meant they were on foot now. And if Tom and the driver reacted fast, they could intercept them before they ever reached the lot. The driver started moving toward the truck, quick. Tom looked down at me, blood running from his cheek, snow sticking to it, and his expression shifted into something cold and decisive. He stepped toward me, point of decision. No more bluffing. I lifted the knife, hand shaking so badly it was almost useless. "Back up," I rasped. He reached into his jacket. For a second, my heart seized, but it wasn't a gun. It was my phone, my phone. He held it up, screen glowing in the dim. Somewhere in the struggle, he'd taken it when he grabbed my sleeve, when he pinned me. I hadn't even noticed. He smiled, small. Then he threw it, not at me, away into the snowbank behind the kiosk, toward the trees. The glowing rectangle vanished with a soft thunk, and the light went out. The gesture was petty and cruel and efficient. It wasn't about the phone itself. It was about making me feel cut off again. My throat tightened around a sob that didn't come out. Tom leaned down, grabbed my wrist with the knife, and twisted. Pain shot through my arm. The knife slipped from my numb fingers. He kicked it away. Snow swallowed it. The driver yelled something from the truck, urgent. Time. Tom grabbed the front of my jacket and hauled me up halfway, dragging me toward the shadowed side of the kiosk, away from the open lot. My injured ankle buckled. shoulder screamed. I clawed at his sleeve with my good hand, nails scraping fabric. He shoved me down again, hard, into the snow behind the kiosk, where the roof blocked the falling flakes and made the air feel oddly still. He crouched close, face inches from mine, blood smeared across his cheek, eyes flat. "You stay quiet," he said. "You stay here. You do not make this worse." And then, because the universe likes cruel timing, my whistle slipped from my pocket, the torn jacket fabric no longer holding it. It fell into the snow between us, bright orange. Tom's eyes dropped to it. A beat. Then he snatched it up, and for the first time, I saw something like panic flicker across his face. Because he knew what it meant. If I had it, I could keep calling attention, keep creating noise, keep owning space. Without it, I was just a person in snow. He stood, stuffed the whistle into his pocket, and turned to run toward the truck. He didn't even look back. The cost of my fight, my shoulder, my ankle, my phone, my knife, my whistle had bought me one thing: time. But time was still running. I lay behind the kiosk, gasping, trying not to black out, listening as footsteps crunched away. Listening to the truck door slam. Listening to the engine rev. Then another sound, closer now, human and urgent, carrying from the access road. "Hello," a voice called male. Familiar in that vague way voices can be when you've heard them through walls. "Maya, Ryan." He'd come. I tried to shout. Only a croak came out. I scraped my good hand against the kiosk post and tried again. "Ryan," I managed, thin. The truck's engine roared louder. Tires spun. Snow sprayed. The pickup jerked forward, then stopped abruptly with a heavy jolt, like it had hit something or stalled. A loud curse from the driver. Then the truck backed up hard, tires fishtailing, and tore out down the access road, abandoning the blockade. Tom's Civic headlights flared, then went dark as he killed them. Footsteps sprinted away into the trees, Tom, cutting off toward the trail rather than the road. The central threat wasn't gone neatly. It fractured and scattered like animals when you kick a nest. Ryan appeared at the edge of the lot, breath puffing hard, holding his phone up like a flashlight. He saw the truck peeling away and froze, confusion on his face turning to alarm as his gaze landed on me. He ran. "What the Maya, Jesus?" He dropped to his knees beside me. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "I can't." My shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. "My phone gone." "Call." He fumbled his own phone, hands shaking. "No service up here." I tried. "It wouldn't." "Your car," I rasped. "Drive down. Call from the road." He looked toward the access road where the truck was now retreating fast, taillights fading into snowfall. "I'm not leaving you," he said, voice cracking. "You have to," I said. He ran into the trees, 2 of them. "Please," Ryan swallowed, eyes flicking around the lot like he expected them to reappear. Okay. He helped me sit up. The movement made my shoulder scream so sharply I nearly vomited. He flinched. "Your arm." "It's my shoulder," I said, teeth clenched. "I think it's bad." He took off his jacket and wrapped it around me, clumsy but earnest, his own fear now spilling out in quick, useless movements. "Where's your car key?" he asked. "In my pocket." "Left," I fumbled with numb fingers. Ryan found it and handed it to me like it was sacred. "I'm going to drive down and call," he said. "I'm coming right back." "Don't come alone," I whispered. "Get police. Ambulance." "Don't." "I know," he said, and for a second he looked like he might cry. "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner. I saw the truck when I pulled in. I didn't want to." "It's fine," I lied automatically, then hated myself for it. Because it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Ryan sprinted back toward his car, which I now noticed parked at an angle near the county road. He'd been forced to stop there because the truck blocked the entrance. I lay back against the kiosk post, trying to keep my breathing even. Snow brushed my face in soft, indifferent touches. Somewhere in the trees, Tom had disappeared. The truck had escaped. My phone was buried somewhere in snow, dark and silent. My knife was lost. My whistle was gone. I'd won nothing clean. But the immediate threat, the immediate physical danger had broken, and the lot was suddenly too quiet again, the way it had been when I first arrived. Only now it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a place where something had happened, and the world was pretending it hadn't. I stared up at the kiosk roof, at the splintered wood where the crowbar had struck, and tried not to imagine how close it had come to my head. My shoulder throbbed in waves. My ankle was already swelling, the boot too tight. I listened for footsteps, for an engine returning, for anything. And in the thin lull before sirens that might or might not come, the thought that kept pushing through the pain was simple and stupid and true. I had tried so hard not to be dramatic that I'd almost let myself be taken quietly. The first siren sounded thin and far away. For a second I thought I'd imagined it, the way you imagine phantom vibrations from a phone that isn't there. I was sitting, propped against the kiosk post, Ryan's jacket around my shoulders, snow building up on my boots. My right arm was held tight against my body because any movement sent a streak of heat through my shoulder that made my vision fuzz. Then the siren came again. Closer, real. Ryan's car had fishtailed halfway down the access road when he left, and he'd had to back down to the county road to get enough signal to call. He came running back up on foot before the police arrived, breathless and pale, saying he didn't want me alone again. He kept apologizing. "I should have just come when I texted you," he said over and over, as if there was a single moment he could rewind and fix. "You did come," I said. It felt important to say it. "You did." When the first patrol SUV pulled into the lot, it had to push through the snow where the pickup had been. The officer stepped out with a flashlight already in his hand, the beam slicing through the falling flakes. His name was Officer Daniel Ortiz, 41, male, Bellingham Police Department. He moved in quick, efficient lines, eyes scanning, posture alert without being frantic. "Ma'am, are you injured?" he asked, crouching beside me. "My shoulder," I said. Talking made my jaw tremble, and I didn't know if that was cold or adrenaline finally draining. "And my ankle." There were two of them. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say calm down or you're safe now. He just nodded and asked, "Weapons?" "Crowbar," I said. "And they took my knife." "Through my phone." He absorbed that, then glanced toward the tree line where Tom had disappeared. Backup arrived in another SUV. Then an ambulance, tires crunching over snow that was already smoothing itself over like nothing had happened. The paramedics moved with quiet competence. One of them, Jillian Marks, 29, female, knelt and gently palpated my shoulder, while I bit down on the inside of my cheek to keep from making a sound. "I think it's dislocated," she said to her partner. "Possible fracture. We'll need imaging." She slid a splint under my arm and wrapped it tight to immobilize the joint. The pressure was awful and relieving at the same time. They helped me onto a stretcher, the metal frame cold through my layers. As they lifted me into the ambulance, I caught sight of the parking lot from a slightly higher angle. The snow was already filling in the scuffed patch where my tires had spun. The splintered kiosk post stood out like a small scar. Tom's Civic was gone. They'd found it abandoned a quarter-mile down the county road, keys still in the ignition, doors unlocked. The pickup was nowhere. Inside the ambulance, the world narrowed to antiseptic smells and soft, practiced voices. Ryan's face hovered near the open doors for a moment. "I'll follow," he said. "I'll meet you at the hospital." I nodded. My shoulder throbbed with every bump in the road. At St. Joseph's, fluorescent lights replaced snow glare. The emergency room smelled faintly of bleach and coffee. The doctor who examined me, Dr. Elise Hammond, 37, female, had steady hands and a low, unhurried voice. "You've got a fracture at the top of the humerus," she said after the x-rays came back, "and a dislocation we've already reduced. You're lucky the crowbar didn't land higher. Lucky." The word lodged somewhere uncomfortable. My ankle, swollen and angry, was a severe sprain. No break, but it would keep me on crutches for a while. They gave me something for pain. It made the edges of everything soften, but it didn't erase the images. Tom's face when I said my name, the driver's forearms swelling where I'd struck him, the way the truck had idled like it had all the time in the world. Officer Ortiz came by the hospital room before I was discharged. He stood near the door, not crowding the bed. "We searched the immediate tree line," he said. "Snow's making it difficult. K9 is en route, but the trail system's extensive." "I know," I said. "We recovered your phone," he added. It was partially buried behind the kiosk, screen cracked but intact. Something in my chest loosened a fraction. "They wiped it?" I asked. "We'll have tech look at it," he said. "You said one of the suspects handled it." "Yes," he nodded. "Your description of both men is helpful. We'll circulate it." There was a gas station camera about a mile down the road. We're pulling footage. He didn't promise they'd be caught. He didn't say this kind of thing never happens here. He just outlined steps, procedural and real. "Did you know either of them?" he asked. "No." He studied my face, maybe looking for hesitation. I shook my head carefully. It made my shoulder twinge. After he left, the room felt too bright. Ryan sat in the plastic chair by the bed, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. There was dried snow on the cuffs of his jeans. "They'll catch them," he said finally, as if convincing himself. "Maybe," I said. I didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. When I got home 2 days later, the world looked normal in a way that felt obscene. The snow on my street had turned gray at the edges. Someone had shoveled their walkway in neat, precise lines. My mailbox was slightly tilted the way it always had been. Ryan had cleared my driveway. He'd brought my car back from the impound lot after forensics dusted it and took samples from the trunk. There were fingerprints, Officer Ortiz had told me. Partial, enough to enter into a database. My emergency kit was back in the trunk, zipped carefully. I stood in my living room, sling tight around my shoulder, and listened. The refrigerator hummed. A car drove by outside. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, ordinary. I moved slowly through the house, turning on lights as dusk settled. The act felt deliberate now. Every shadow a thing to consider. In the bathroom mirror, I saw the bruising blooming under my collarbone and along my upper arm, deep purple fading to yellow at the edges. My ankle was wrapped stiff. I looked older than I had 3 days ago. The police called that evening. They'd identified the pickup as stolen from a lot in Everett 2 days before the incident. Plates swapped. VIN partially obscured. Tom's Civic was registered to a name that didn't match the one he'd given me. The address on file was vacant. Professional? Ryan asked when I related. I don't know, I said. Maybe just practiced. That was worse, somehow. The third set of prints, the smaller ones, turned out to belong to a teenage girl who'd cut across the trail earlier that afternoon. Her parents called after seeing a police notice online, worried their daughter might have witnessed something. She hadn't. She'd been wearing earbuds and had taken a shortcut to meet friends near the overlook. That thread closed neatly. Too neatly. A week later, the snow melted. The lot looked like any other trailhead again. Tire tracks, mud, litter caught under the kiosk. I didn't go back, not at first. Physical therapy became part of my routine. Twice a week, I sat in a bright room with resistance bands and mirrors, while a therapist guided my arm through small, controlled movements. Trust the joint, he said. It'll feel unstable before it feels strong. Trust. The word had new weight. I started locking my doors the second I stepped inside my house. I installed a camera over my front porch. I answered texts more quickly. Ryan stopped by most evenings for the first week, bringing takeout and sitting awkwardly on my couch, as if proximity alone could fix something. We didn't talk about the way Tom had said my name. We didn't talk about how easily they'd moved in the lot. One night, when the sling had come off and I could lift my arm almost halfway without pain, I took the whistle out of my coat pocket, where the police had returned it in an evidence bag. They'd found it in the snow near where Tom had run. The plastic was scratched. The orange dulled. I held it for a long moment. Then I looped it back onto a new lanyard and hung it by my door. Not because I thought it would save me again, but because I didn't want to forget that I'd used it. There was a knock on my door a month later. 3 quick raps. My heart kicked once hard. I stood in the hallway listening. No follow-up knock, no voice. I checked the camera feed on my phone. A delivery driver was walking back to his van, empty porch behind him. I exhaled slowly. Ordinary, but not untouched. Officer Ortiz called again 6 weeks after the incident. They'd matched a partial print from my phone to a man with prior arrests for theft and assault. A warrant was issued and hadn't been located yet. Tom, whatever his real name was, remained unidentified. Cases like this take time, Ortiz said. We're not dropping it. I know, I said, and I believed him. I went back to Pine Ridge in early spring, not alone. Ryan walked beside me, hands shoved in his pockets, scanning more than he needed to. The trees were green again at the tips. The ground was soft with thaw. We stood at the kiosk. The splintered wood had been replaced. The map was new, laminated, and bright. If you didn't know what had happened, you wouldn't see anything out of place. I walked a few yards down the trail, just enough to hear the crunch of gravel under my boots. No snow now. No clean canvas to tell you who had been there. I looked down anyway. For a second, in the shifting light, I imagined a narrow tread beside mine, perfectly aligned. Then a breeze moved through the trees, and the illusion broke. It was just dirt, just trail. Ryan cleared his throat. You good? I nodded. Yeah, I said. And I meant it in the way you mean something that isn't entirely true, but isn't entirely false either. The world hadn't ended. The men hadn't won. But there was a new calculation in everything now, a small mental map of exits, of sightlines, of what could be explained and what couldn't. I still hike. I don't go without telling someone exactly where I am. And sometimes, when snow falls clean and untouched, I think about how honest it looks, how it promises to show you what's there. and how easily it can lie. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you.